I didn't feel the bullet when it tore through my shoulder just a snap, like bone biting into itself, and the heat, like someone pressed a branding iron into my skin. Then, I heard his scream. We were pinned beneath a collapsed farmhouse outside Bakhmut. The roof had given in from shelling, timber beams tangled with rebar and glass. Smoke slithered through cracks in the rubble, thick with plaster dust and the sour stench of burnt flesh. I remember blinking through it, the white-out haze like snow in a nightmare. "Zora!" I shouted, but I already knew. He was to my right a moment before it happened. We had both ducked into that hollow beneath the staircase, laughing like idiots because we thought we'd made it in time. Then the blast. And when the ceiling fell, it fell on him. He took it, all of it. I think I started laughing, a dry, broken sound. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. I remember the grit of blood in my teeth, and how his hand-he's left one was still clutching my sleeve, even though the rest of him was hidden under the weight of it all. I tugged at it like a child. Don't you dare. I knew he was dying. You can feel it. There's something that seeps into the air, like heat from a dying fire. Quiet, final. But his fingers squeezed mine. Once. And then it all went still. The first time I met Zora, he'd just finished dragging a burning tire off the road to clear the path for our truck. He looked ridiculous, covered in soot, hair wild with static, eyes lit up like he'd just wrestled God and won. He grinned at me like we were already old friends. "You're the new radio guy, right?" he said. "Hope to God you're not one of those that sings into the mic during fire missions." I wasn't. I didn't even sing in the shower. But I learned fast. With Zora, you had to. He had this way of making everything feel like a game, even when it wasn't. He called trench rotations spa days, and enemy shelling fireworks practice. When I broke down during my first body recovery, small boy, maybe 10, crumpled under shrapnel and covered with his mother's coat, Zora just crouched beside me, didn't say anything, just handed me a cigarette with hands that didn't shake. "First time's the worst," he finally said. "Second time's worse than that." Now his blood was soaking into my pants. The shelling had stopped. That's the part they never tell you, that the silence after is worse. Because it lets you hear everything. The drip of blood from your own nose. The faint ticking of your watch, still strapped to your broken wrist. The wind whistling through the ribs of a dead house. I tried to move. Couldn't. My left leg was pinned beneath something too heavy to identify might have been part of the roof, might have been Zora. My throat was raw from dust and panic. I reached up to my radio and winced when pain lanced through my shoulder. The antenna had snapped. Of course it had. "Command, this is Lynx," I whispered anyway, into dead static. "Do you copy?" Nothing. I blinked hard, trying to stay awake. If I slept, I wouldn't wake up. I knew that. My vision was tunneling just the edge of everything, turning black, like ink in water. And then, a cough. Not mine. "Zora?" I rasped. Silence. I turned my head. It wasn't him. It was someone else. A soldier. Ukrainian uniform, slumped in the far corner of the rubble, half buried under debris. I hadn't seen him before. His leg was twisted the wrong way, his face smeared with soot and blood, but his eyes, they were open, staring at me. "Help," he croaked, just once. I started crawling, inch by inch. My legs screamed with every movement, and my arm dragged uselessly behind me, blood dripping in thick, lazy trails. But I moved. Because he was alive. And if I could help him, maybe then Zora's death wouldn't just be another name scribbled in chalk on some blackboard that the rain would wash away. I don't remember how long it took. Time felt like water in my lungs rushing and drowning, and still. When I finally reached him, I tore a strip from my undershirt, pressed it to his leg. He was shaking so badly I had to hold him down with my knee. "Stay with me," I kept muttering. "You stay with me, you bastard. Don't make this for nothing." He nodded. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear the words. Then I saw it. He was holding something. A photo. Small, laminated. A woman with a tired smile. A child with a gap-toothed grin. I didn't ask who they were. Didn't need to. I just put the photo in his chest pocket and zipped it shut. "You'll show them this yourself," I whispered. "You hear me? You will." I think I was crying. I don't remember. The taste of dust and blood had become the same. And somewhere, in the static of my broken radio, a voice finally crackled through. "Lynx, this is Command. Do you read? Extraction en route." I let my head fall back and laughed. It didn't sound human. It sounded like something breaking free. When they pulled me out, I didn't feel relief. I felt shame, because when they asked for his name, I couldn't answer. Not Zora, the other one, the man I saved. I still don't know who he was, but he lived, and I did too. Zora didn't. He died so I could live, and I still don't know why it was me. Maybe I never will. Maybe that's the point. They gave me 3 weeks in a hospital near Dnipro. Morphine dreams, white ceilings, nurses with eyes like exhausted angels. I spent most of the time staring at the cracks in the plaster, tracing shapes into them. Faces, cities, constellations. Anything but the truth. They tried to pin medals on me, called it heroism. Said I'd dragged another man through hell and brought him back. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Zora's hand, still clutching my sleeve, knuckles white with death. I never told them about that, about how he didn't scream, about how he just took it. The doctors kept saying I was lucky, that I'd walk again, that the bullet missed my artery by 0.5 centimeter, that the collapse hadn't crushed my spine, that survival was a miracle. Funny how people love miracles when they're not the ones buried beneath them. They didn't see me in that bed at night, whispering into a dead radio, calling out names of the dead. Jora's, the kid from the trench who used to hum lullabies under his breath. Even the sergeant I hated, who died screaming in his sleep after stepping on a mine near Kupiansk. I whispered their names like prayers. Like maybe if I said them enough times, they'd answer. They never did. My mother called once. I remember her voice trembling as she said my name, like she wasn't sure it was still mine. I couldn't speak. Just listened to her breathing, soft and shallow, like she was afraid to wake me, or afraid of what I'd say. She told me she lit a candle for me every night, that the church in our village had run out of room for the photographs on the prayer wall, that old Father Kolia had started stapling them to the ceiling. I almost laughed, but I couldn't, because I knew Zora's face was up there too. I kept seeing his grin in the smoke, hearing his voice in the shriek of trains outside the hospital. First time's the worst, he'd said. He never told me what came after. They cleared me for light duty after 2.5 weeks. I lied and said I felt fine. Truth is, I couldn't feel much of anything. My leg throbbed like a second heartbeat, and my shoulder felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. But the real damage was deeper, quieter. It sat in my chest like shrapnel that hadn't been found. I could feel it every time I took a breath, a sharpness that reminded me I was still alive. Still alive. I started keeping a journal. Not for the dead. Every night I wrote letters I'd never send. To Zora. To the man I saved. To the child in the field, his face pale beneath the coat. Sometimes I drew instead. Not well, but enough to make shapes, symbols. There was one I drew over and over again, a broken staircase, half submerged in ash. It was the last thing I saw before the world collapsed. Command offered me a reassignment behind the lines. Comms work in the West, safe. I thanked them, then packed my bag and volunteered for rotation back to the front. They thought I was insane. Maybe I was. But it wasn't about death anymore. It was about something else. Obligation. Or maybe guilt. I told myself that if I could go back, if I could keep even one man breathing long enough to hear his own heartbeat, that maybe it would make Jora's sacrifice mean something. That maybe I could carry it. Not fix it. Not undo it. Just carry it. They assigned me to a mobile recon unit near Cremina. Different faces, different scars, but the same looks in their eyes like they'd seen behind the curtain and didn't like what waited there. My new CO was a woman named Sasha. Cold eyes, sharper tongue. First thing she said to me was, "If you're here to be a ghost, leave now. We've got enough of those already." I didn't leave. She didn't ask again. Our unit specialized in night movements, drones, close recon, sabotage runs, small teams, tight spaces, quiet kills. It suited me. At night, I moved through burned forests and shattered villages like a shadow, listening, marking, reporting. One evening, we came across a body caught in barbed wire, barely more than a boy, probably 19. His face had been picked at by birds, but his uniform still bore the double-headed eagle. The man beside me dim-a-spit on the ground and muttered something about pigs, but I just stared. Not out of pity, out of horror, because in his hand, a photo, laminated, a woman, a child. My breath caught. It wasn't the same photo, but it could have been. And for a moment, the line blurred. Zora, the man I saved. This boy, tangled in razor wire. All of them began to mix in my mind. One long line of ghosts. I wanted to believe I was different, that I'd made the right choice. But what if I hadn't? What if Zora died to save a man who went home, hugged his daughter, and then came back with a rifle and killed 3 more of us? Would it still be worth it? Would any of this? I didn't sleep that night. I just sat against a dead tree and listened to the wind move through broken branches. It sounded like breath, like 1,000 men whispering their last words into the dirt. There's no moral in this, no glory, no clean ending where the good live and the bad fall and the wounded return home with medals and a handshake. There's just mud, blood, and the weight of a sleeve still gripped by dead fingers. Zora died so I could live, and some days, that fact keeps me moving. Other days, it crushes me. But every night I whisper his name, just once. Not to forget, not to make it easier, but because remembering is the only thing I have left to give.